um, to sell their university degrees. So success at our event may result in people join their universities to join these teams. But I honestly think any student that joins a SAE team is a hero and has prestige associated with them. And I think industry is starting to recognize that as well.
Yeah, well, it sounds like an incredibly lucrative competition. How, like, when a university is represented, are we talking like a large number of students? Or are we talking like your 5 or 6 sort of thing?
Well, it really depends on the university. So, you might have a team like Monash Motorsport, which comes with an army of people, but
Yeah,
then you might have a smaller team like Vic Uni or one of the Queensland's teams where they may only have 5 or 6 people,
yeah,
right? But at the end of the day, it's not necessarily about how you place. It's also about the journey of getting to the competition.
yeah, yeah. And the journey of getting, so you've got this prestigious competition where you're got a group of engineering students from all around, it sounds like all around the world submitting through their cars to be tested on these criteria. How often do they run the competition?
Only once a year.
Once a year. So
So
they pretty much planning from day after you've finished doing it, pretty much. This is where we came unstuck last year. This is where we want to improve for next year, sort of thing.
absolutely.
Do they
And
start from scratch or do they just kind of modify?
well, that depends. That also depends on the team. So
Yeah.
the because it is an engineering challenge, we do have rules in place that specify that a car should be new or unique for each year.
Yeah.
Um, but we also, as engineering, we've got a sustainable responsibility or social responsibility to ensure that parts, even though it might be a new design, a lot of parts are generally carried over
Yeah.
from car to car.
Yeah. For sustainability of creation of parts and that sort of thing, that kind of
Yeah,
makes a bit of sense.
absolutely. And design resources as well. It takes a lot of engineering resource to design and build these cars. Um, when quite often, they may only need improvements.
Yeah. So
Um,
when did you start it with Formula SAE? Was it back in was it 2013, was it?
that,
Or
yeah, that's correct. So this competition will mark my 10th year of involvement.
yeah. So tell me about the autonomous vehicle segment. When did the autonomous vehicle segment get introduced at Formula SAE?
Okay, well, I think it was really sort of pushed on by Monash with their will and their want to make autonomous a thing. So when they presented their vehicle for the demo, and we're like, whoa, what are we going to do? That really sparked the conversations. So over our COVID years, 2020, 2021, we went into a really heavy planning phase. How can we make this a competition? And we're not quite there at a competition. We've got it as a demonstration at the moment.
Yeah.
But last year in 2022, we successfully held our first demonstration of autonomous racing cars in Australia.
Wow. So obviously the obvious question would be, as a judge of the autonomous vehicle segment, what can you tell us regarding some of the exciting technology that's coming through at this time?
Well, where do I begin? We're,
Good place to start, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, fundamentally, autonomous, it means the car makes its own decisions.
Yeah.
It decides if it turns left or if it turns right. And the big question around technology is how does it do it? And more importantly, how does it do it safely? So these
Yeah.
vehicles are fitted with sensors like LiDARs and other vision systems that allow them to see.
Wow.
The cars also have controlled braking, and they have, when I talk about ability to see, we set up the track in such a way that we have two different color cones on
Yeah.
each side of the track. We have a yellow and a blue, and the, the the teams actually choose which vision system that they use to detect the cones, because we
Okay.
also have cones at different heights to symbolize different things.
Yeah.
For instance, we have a larger cone that might be used for the start and finish line. So closed circuit tracks, and the cars travel around the tracks, and they're trying to do a certain amount of laps in a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
You know, when I talked about safety, because the cars make their own decisions, we've got rules in place that say if the car goes outside of the cones or the designated track, they should automatically be able to disable themselves.
Yeah.
But as we know with experimental systems, what could go wrong would go wrong.
Yeah.
So we also have a team member with a remote emergency stop button in hand.
Yeah, I was going
So
to say, when you
yeah,
were saying autonomous, I was thinking, as soon as you start thinking about making their own, or, making its own decisions, I was thinking, surely you've got somebody in the pit lane with a remote control, just in
absolutely.
case.
Yeah, it was funny, but in preparation for this meeting this morning, I was watching Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines,
Yeah.
and they've got this guy, Army General, saying, "Oh, Skynet, surely, the humans are being in control of the software that is Skynet." But it wasn't the case, and the robots turned bad, and we know the rest of the story.
Yeah.
But for our cars, we very much do have someone, a human, that can disable the car at any time.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously, that's allowing it to drive around the track. What's some of the other stuff that you've found, like in the last, how many years has the autonomous vehicle segment been in existence?
Well, really, in Australia, we're in our second year, so we're
Second
still
year, yeah.
we're still new, we're still learning.
And some of the, not just in the autonomous space, but some of the things that these engineering students are creating, in the last 10 years, have you seen, like, have you been, I don't know, looking at a car ad and they're saying that they've got this sensor and that sensor and going, well, that came through our competition like 5 or 6 years back. Do you have any of those sort of pinch me moments? Or
I do, but I mean, unfortunately, I don't really see them on car ads. I see them through industry projects.
of course, yeah.
Yeah. So, being in industry myself, I work with engineers that have come through the SAE projects and teams,
Yeah.
and they're working on the next generation of technologies, whether it be drones or self-driving transport vehicles,
Yeah.
or people trying to set world records in the autonomous space.
Yeah. I know who
Yeah.
you're sort of suggesting with that one. That would probably be our good mate, Ben Felton.
It is. It is our good mate, Ben Felton. So
Yeah.
I actually met Ben through SAE as well. He was the keynote speaker for last year's competition.
Yeah.
And I was just blown away, impressed with someone that has low to no vision, and yet he's going out there and setting world records.
Yeah.
And I want to be part of that
Very,
personally.
very cool. Very, very cool. So let's talk a little bit about overseas at the moment, because I love having this conversation with Ben as well around some of the innovation that's coming in with autonomous vehicles overseas. Um,
Yeah.
do you have a knowledge of that as well, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sort of trying to keep a track of it. Like, there's two big countries of innovation. We've got the Germans,
Yeah.
led by companies like Bosch, Mercedes, Audi, Volkswagen Group, and then we have the Americans, and obviously, we've got the GMs, the Fords, and we've got Tesla,
Yeah.
right? And it's really interesting, the developments that are coming about, and particularly around safety concerns. So, and it's remarkable from where the technology came from just say 10 years ago to where it is today. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And like, have you seen some of this does this technology just come out in cars, or have you seen it used in other sort of real world sort of situations?
Well, definitely, I've seen it used in much more boring robots. So,
Yeah.
LiDAR and spatial recognition and 3D mapping stuff is
Yeah.
commonly used in the industry, and that's been mostly my experience
Yeah.
with it.
The Google Maps car sort of driving around
Yeah,
the place. Yeah.
yeah, those things, but also like devices that are used to 3D scan objects,
Yeah.
because it uses the same kind of technologies of light determining distance in a 3D space.
Yeah. I remember having a conversation, or geez, it would have been about a year ago, with Mike May over in the US, who is known a little bit as the GPS godfather for blind and low vision people. And he was working for an organization at the time called Good Maps, who were sending people in with this backpack and 3D imaging workplaces and places of public places and that sort of thing. Is that what you're kind of talking about a little bit there?
Yeah, absolutely. Like also with different GPS technologies now as well. Like, you know, we've got Baodu, we've got Glasnos, you know, we've got the standard American GPS suite. Like
Yeah.
even that GPS technology has improved so much.
Yes.
And the accuracy that we get today is so much better than the civilian accuracy we would get a few years ago.
Yeah.
Now, I have to disclaim that with civilian because military accuracy is something totally different.
Yeah, yeah, of course, of
Yeah,
course. And look, when I was speaking to Mike, he was saying, it used to be like a life-changing situation that you could get, within 15 meters of where your destination was supposed to be, especially for somebody who's blind or low vision. But now it's like, yeah, within like 2 or 3 meters of the entry of the door, and it's telling you which way to look, to your right or to your left, and very,
it
very fascinating sort of field. Um, and Ben and I have spoken a little bit about this as well. Do you see any technology that you've seen in the last 2 years that you can see getting real world applications in the next couple of years? Is there something that sticks out to you on that space?
well, I think we should be prepared or getting ourselves prepared for autonomous transport.
Yeah,
Um, it's going to start with mail delivery and, you know, things like Amazon drones and, you know, Domino's pizza bots.
yeah. So
But
it's not like the hoverboard in Back to the Future where you are actually going to get a autonomous vehicle.
I think so. I think, and we've got companies in the space such as Applied EV that are really pushing the envelope. And you know, um, they've got it. Their blank robot, if you're inclined to Google it, is is here. Like
Yeah.
it's what really stops these things is that legislation has to change to keep up with the
Yeah.
technology now.
Yeah, and I've spoken to quite a few engineers, and when you start mentioning autonomous vehicles or coming even, so thank you for coming to speak to us about them, but even coming to speak to us about them, there was, depending on what sort of engineer you were, there were a lot of people that weren't willing to talk about it because they were concerned around there's so much legislation, there's so much things that would have to come to play before we start talking about, it getting rolled out in Australia. But you're right, the technology seems like it's already there.
Yeah.
And from what I've been told as well, certain countries are already kind of implementing a lot of this technology, especially over in the States.
Yeah, but like any kind of new technology, of course, there's going to be teething issues.
Yeah,
And when we talk about teething issues in the mobility space, we've got to be very cautious and conservative in our approach.
yeah.
Yeah,
And look, and at this point in time too in Australia, we're dealing with the teething issues of electrical vehicles still.
we yeah
And obviously with our clientele as well, being able to actually hear them coming. So I can only imagine this is a whole nother level again. And I'm sure most people have seen what could happen when things go wrong. The Google car I remember seeing on its roof at least once. So
yeah
it can happen, these things, even if you are traveling quite slow.
yeah absolutely. And it may surprise people that with the current generation of autonomous systems, they actually work better on the freeway at higher speeds.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, it's actually really hard if you're in bumper to bumper traffic to gauge the environment.
yeah,
And I believe the current generation of autonomous systems in bumper to bumper actually might shut down
yeah,
or require driver intervention heavily.
yeah, yeah. And that's probably where it's going to, I would say, land in the short term. It won't be completely. I mean, we're already seeing things like sensors on cars that stop the car when pedestrians are walking across and stuff like that. I'm imagining some of that sort of would have come through Formula SAE as well. Some of
Yeah,
that stuff that's now getting rolled out in traditional cars.
yeah, absolutely. Um, most of the stuff honestly comes from the Bosch research labs,
Yeah,
which a lot of our students and alumni go through. Um, but it's great to see that technology finally coming into the field.
Yeah, fantastic.
Oh.
So tell me a little bit about who won last year's competition?
Well, so for us, in autonomous, we
Yeah,
had a very impressive showing by two teams.
yeah,
So we had QUT, Queensland University of Technology, with a beautiful, beautiful, I would say, orange autonomous vehicle.
yeah,
It was just, uh, it was beautifully presented. And we also had Monash Motorsports, Monash University.
yeah,
Um, so due to it being a demonstration, we didn't have all the time in the world on the track. We only had time for Monash to demonstrate their vehicle going around the track autonomously, and they did so successfully. And they 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 got the first, I guess, honor of completing AV demonstration at FSAE.
and this was all run down. It was at Winton
That's
race
yeah,
course.
yeah, that's right, Winton Racecourse.
Yeah, so
Yeah, yeah.
um, I imagine the actual setting up of this particular competition would be huge amount of outlay of hours and that sort of thing as well. Even setting up the cones and having it all tested. And do you have teams that are sort of coming down for like 3-4 days before the competition to test? Or
Well, ironically, we do, but we don't allow teams to test necessarily at competition.
okay, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so a lot of the teams come prepared. Um, I know with Monash, they were testing weeks and weeks and weeks before the competition, and they were prepared. They were ready to go. And,
yeah,
and same with QUT. Um, but it's because of our schedule. We have 2 days of scrutineering, and then we have only a few hours where teams can demonstrate their autonomous vehicles. So
yeah,
there's not a lot of time or gap for anything else in between.
yeah, of course. So talking about the Formula SAE competition, not the autonomous vehicle segment, um, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Tell us something about when technology has been sort of ruled out through
Oh,
one of these competitions where they've they've trialed a bit of this technology and they've been told, yeah, don't do that again.
that's a really interesting thing. I'm trying to think of a technology group that's been banned or outlawed. Uh,
Not necessarily banned or
yeah,
outlawed. I was just thinking along the lines of, if you had a pedestrian sensor that didn't work or something like that, and they've gone, oh,
yeah.
let's not use that.
Well, there's sort of that's an interesting point, because that's where I really would like to take autonomous vehicles.
Yeah,
So at the moment, it's, we're still in a demonstration, and we're learning to walk before we can run.
yeah, of
But
course.
so and we don't necessarily have additional sensors apart from sensors that are really specific to sensing the track and the cones.
Yeah,
Um, but one of the things that I'm really cautious and conscious of is that it would be possible for someone to remote control a vehicle,
yeah,
autonomous vehicle. So
okay.
how do we know as event organizers if a car is actually doing a pre-planned circuit
Yeah,
or is being remotely controlled? Because
yeah,
the car autonomous means that it has to be making its own decisions.
yeah, yeah. I imagine that's a bit like I remember seeing in the Olympics with like Olympic walking, and they've got so many rules about their walking position of hips and things like that. And if you could get right to the finish line and get disqualified, or so yeah, that's a good point. That would be a concern. Somebody sitting in pit lane being able to remote control it.
Yeah, yeah, and also, solely relying on GPS data.
Yeah,
So, potentially someone could just map out their track and then just do GPS waypoints. Well, that's not really autonomous. That's just a car replaying a track.
yeah,
I mean, it's impressive, but it's not
yeah.
autonomous.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah.
So with the two teams that brought an autonomous vehicle for demonstration, what is about those two cars that you think made it a successful demonstration?
Well, I think
Making it
they
around the track in one piece, I imagine, would be one of them.
yes, yeah, that's it. So completing the track, but the success is not necessarily around the track. For me, success in autonomous is students that have learnt on their journey to the competition. You know, the competition is actually just the cream on the cake, because everything important actually doesn't happen at the competition. It
Mm.
happens in design, development, preparation, and their learning experience. So when I get to talk to student engineers that are passionate and they're so into it, like they're so much smarter than me, right? These guys are subject matter experts in maybe that vision sensor or the robot operating system that some teams use. Like they're just phenomenal, these students, and that's what success is for me.
Yeah, yeah, and continually to grow as well, I imagine as well. Um, so I guess at this point, I've just got to quickly go through and just let people know, if you are interested in asking a question today, please use keystroke Alt H, type your question in and press enter. We're about halfway through the webinar now. So if we do have any questions, I'll do another reminder a couple of minutes out saying that we've got our last questions coming up, and we'll continue on. So I guess I'd probably been asked this more than any other question coming up into this webinar. And I'm asking for, in your opinion, because I know that you're not in charge of the legislation side of things, but in your opinion, how far are we off having technology for a self-driving car out on our roads and potentially having a blind or low vision person in the passenger seat?
Well, look, I can't qualify that, and I can't speak for Vic Roads, and I
Yeah,
I would like to say by 2030.
2030.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Like I would say the technology is so close, but we're just got to be cautious and conservative.
Yes, because
Yeah,
there'll be all kinds of planning and all kinds of testing, I imagine, that would go through all of that. Um, what's some of the teething issues that you've heard of from overseas that are already starting to implement this technology?
um, I think it's how to mitigate fatalities.
Yes, yeah, of
Um,
course.
so like humans are very good at making split second decisions.
Yeah,
So I put it forward that imagine you've got a situation where you the vehicle breaks traction, it breaks grip, and it's sliding out of control. No matter what control system, whether it would have been an autonomous system or a driver, has the ability to bring this vehicle back into control um, until it loses momentum, right?
yeah,
But the only thing that the driver or the autonomous system can do is minimize the amount of harm, right?
yes, yeah,
How do you teach an autonomous system on harm minimization
yes.
and reducing fatalities?
Yes, yeah,
Uh,
definitely. That split second decision of, if I swerve left at this point, I'm going to hurt myself, but I'm not going to take out 20 pedestrians,
yeah,
sort of situation.
but it becomes even more complicated than that. Like, so of course the self-preservation rules, but what happens if it's a decision between taking out one person and taking out five people? Like,
Yeah,
does age play a effect in that? Like,
yeah,
there's some very tough decisions that have to be made before this technology is, live for use.
yeah. And
And
look, as I said, I commend you for coming and speaking to us about it, because as I said, I know a lot of engineers that would get very, very twitchy at that question, because it is so up in the air. And when I spoke to Ben about it recently as well, I remember him saying, by the time that we've come to the point where we're happy to say, right, we've got a self-driving autonomous vehicle, the next discussion may well be, all right, well, let's have an autonomous running city.
yeah,
That's, um, and that's almost less of a scary discussion than the autonomous vehicle side of things.
absolutely. And like maybe they're the discussions that, local governments and federal government should be having about in 2050, what does mobility look like? And what does personal mobility look like?
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm guessing we're not going to like hover cars or anything like that. Sounds very much like the wheels are here to stay.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I think so. But
You can
it's how
never
we
say for sure, couldn't can you? It's
no, but I would like to see more accessible public transport for one.
yeah,
Um, but I think the problem's not, once again, not with the technology, it's about political will.
yes, of course.
Yeah.
So discussing the technology, just the technology, you're thinking 2030 we could have a little, well, you're obviously seeing at ground level that a lot of this technology is possible, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Like, if we had a really controlled environment, um, that we knew what was going to happen and what we could expect, there's no reason why we couldn't have autonomous vehicles on the road today. But it's all those radical things that, um, about the randomness of our environments, that makes autonomous systems, fully autonomous in the SAE levels,
Yeah.
um, fully available today.
So what's some of the things you've seen in this competition that you think will start to make it out into the world in the next sort of year and a half, something like that?
Well, we've already seen like LiDAR and radar based visioning systems used in vehicles.
Yeah.
We're seeing active lane assistance.
Yeah.
So I was going to a race event on Saturday, and one of my colleagues was driving a brand new Mercedes,
Yes.
and it had all the bells and whistles, lane assist. Of course, it can park itself,
Yeah.
and it has a level of autonomy that it could steer itself on the freeway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that's the technology that we currently have available, but also some of this technology is also being developed and extended on in our competition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. So particularly around low speed handling.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that sounds a lot like um it could sort of play into what we're seeing with radar sort of cruise control and that sort of thing, sort of keeping a distance, kind of like I don't want to use a primitive example, but maybe like a tandem cycling sort of situation where you've got like two cyclists in each other's slipstream sort of learning.
Yeah. There's situations similar to that. What is interesting though is what Tesla wanted to use all camera-based vision systems for their self-driving modes.
Right.
And recently, I think they made a very quiet announcement about using fused data sensors. So, having LiDAR sensors again, and radar as well, part of their systems.
Right.
Because I, I think the problem's very complex, and no one sensor technology would solve it all. We need a fused approach.
Yeah. So far as sort of teams, and I'm not talking just in the autonomous vehicle space, but just teams in the Formula SAE competition, um, who's bringing out some stuff that's just like light years ahead of what you would what you would expect? Who's
Well,
really kicking goals at this point?
Well, I would say Monash Motorsport. They're really sort of pushing the envelope of what these SAE vehicles can do. Um,
Yeah.
they're planning on bringing to competition this year a dual purpose vehicle, so a car that will compete in the electric vehicle class as well as the autonomous vehicle class, but a single vehicle.
Yeah.
So, that's sort of like pushing, we're sort of just getting our heads around autonomous, and they're pushing us to try and do better.
And a lot of that sort of technology, I know, because I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to motorsports as well. That technology of having like an electric motor kicking you off the start and then having, a petrol motor taking over and an electric motor taking over from that. So having like two electric motors and one petrol motor. A lot of that started in Formula One, if I'm not wrong. Is that
Yeah,
a good sort of assessment?
yeah, yeah. So, the whole thing of, race on Sunday and you buy on Monday kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, traditionally, Formula One has been the demonstration class of these technologies.
Yeah.
and the automakers then try and use that F1 technology in their road vehicles.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, like I mean, we've gone through technology upgrades over the last 20 or so years of SAE in Australia,
Yeah.
because when it began, electric vehicles weren't really a thing,
Yeah.
right? For us, it was just petrol engines, combustion,
Yeah.
and we still have combustion vehicles today competing, but it was really in 2000, 2010s, 11s, where we started having teams like Swinburne, RMIT, and Monash, come up with electric vehicles, and that was pushing the competition at the time.
Yeah.
And that was before the likes of Tesla
Yeah.
really emerging. They were around, but they hadn't really hit the mainstream.
Yeah, no, I remember seeing like for lack of a better term, like a very slow, low gliding sort of solar car, and then that powered electric motor, and then now we're seeing these supercars like Lamborghini supercars with like electric motors and that sort of thing. You're like, well, yeah, that's a bit chalk and cheese, isn't it?
Well, absolutely, and I mean, we do in the electric vehicle class, we do measure energy utilization as well, right?
Yeah,
But we're not trying to cross the desert, right? We're
yeah,
we're
good
trying to
point.
do we're trying to do quick laps around a track,
Yeah,
So our use case is different. Like our SAE vehicles are by no means slow. They're very
yeah,
fast. They're very exciting, and over the last 10 years, we've seen a huge shift from petrol combustion vehicles to the electrification, so much so that most of our grid, I would say 75% of our cars, were electric vehicles.
yeah, which
And
is very much heading into also the European market as well, and the European sort of everything is going to be electric by, was it 2024 or something, 2025?
2025. And
Yeah.
we're starting to, in Australia, we're starting to follow that trend as well.
Is it still the trend that European cars are about, or they say about 10 years ahead of sort of Japanese and Australian cars, or is it kind of catching up now,
Look, eh,
in your
this
opinion?
Yeah, look, the European cars are just, there's something else. The Mercedes, the BMWs, even the Audis, they're fantastic vehicles. But I'm really interested in the everyday car. Like, so I'm really excited by what Toyota's doing.
Yeah,
So they've actively gone out and said, when other automakers like Holden, Ford, General Motors and Ford in the States are gone, we're going to go all electric. Well, Toyota said, we we don't think all electric's right. We think electrification is good. We think hydrogen and alternative energy is good. But for some things, you still need diesel and standard fuels. It just depends on your application.
yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah,
I think Toyota's really forward thinking in their approach to mobility.
yeah, definitely. And it doesn't hurt that they've got a huge sort of network of parts and that sort of thing around the world as well. It's one of these few moments where I get to put my hands up in the air and cheer the fact I have a Corolla. There aren't too many more moments where I get that opportunity,
Yeah,
especially not off the start.
that's right. I'm my family also has a Corolla, and they're fantastic cars, very reliable.
So tell me, so you've been with Formula SAE for 10 years. Where do you see the next 10 years going?
Well, I
Are
see
you
more.
going to be with Formula SAE for the next 10 years? That's the question, isn't it?
Well, I think I will. I don't get paid. It's a volunteer role, like most people that sit on the organising committee.
Yeah.
Um, I see myself involved for as long as I'm welcome.
Yeah.
Um, but
Perfect.
I want to be driving autonomous to transition it from a demonstration into a competition.
Yeah.
And some of the things that we've talked about today, I want to see if I can integrate that into a type of competition. For instance, object avoidance. So
Yeah.
we can actually define some of our dynamic driving events. And at the moment, we've only got one, and we do generally follow what the Europeans do with their their autonomous competitions.
Yeah.
But I want to see things that push the students to think outside the box and perhaps innovate in the technology space. And I want to see, by change or setting the rules and foundation, how that can drive innovation.
And I'm going to be a bit of a bogan here for a second and say, how fast are these autonomous vehicles going at this point in time?
Well, we try and limit their speeds on purpose because they are designed by students, and and by design, I believe there's a, and don't quote me on this, I think there's a hard limit of, they're not allowed to go over 100 kilometers. But yeah, don't quote me. It's been a while since I've checked out that rule.
Okay.
And there's
Yeah.
limits on how fast they can accelerate as well.
Okay. So
Yeah.
no, wheels spinning off the line,
Oh
but
no, no,
they're
no,
still
you still
getting,
get that. Yeah,
you still get that?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Because
It
you
wouldn't be
still,
motorsport without that.
that's right. You know, but you, the objective of motorsport in this one is to do the fastest lap. So you've got to really choose: is spinning your wheel using more time, or
Yeah, good call.
you
Good
know,
call.
it's an engineering decision between grip and speed.
Yeah. So with these autonomous vehicles as well, have you seen anything heading into, because I know Ben's got an interest in this as well, but have you seen anything heading into the drag racing scene sort of thing?
Yeah, I've had a few chats this year with Ben, since forming a friendship and seeing where we can find common ground. I'm really curious around what Ben does with blind speed and blind speed technology.
Yeah.
Um, and I've done a little bit of a market study of what's used for blind speed racing, such as drag racing.
Yeah.
A lot of it draws on technologies that's are in the open source domain, like Ardu Pilot. But yeah, what I would like to do with Ben is design and develop a local system that can help Ben navigate to becoming the fastest man on the planet in an electric vehicle.
Right, there you go. So that's your 10-year goal right there.
Well, hopefully it's a lot sooner than that.
Well, he won't let you go 10 years, no.
No, no. And I mean, as we've highlighted today, the technology exists. We've just got to piece it together. And it becomes just a question of trying to get the right sponsors on board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Pretty
Yeah.
cool. And that, I imagine, leads into other sort of areas of the world as well, where you've got, is some of this technology getting used in airplanes and stuff like that as
Oh,
well?
absolutely. Unfortunately, a lot of it's probably used for things that we don't
Military
want to talk about.
purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But like I can think of actually no better purpose for it to be used for personal mobility.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So, fascinating stuff. As I said, I remember, I think I spent like 45 minutes chatting to Ben around mobile, like autonomous cities, and how, he can see cities sort of operating on you walk out the front using your cane and you order a car and it rocks up and you sit in it and away it goes, basically on one big sort of loop around the city, much like a tram, but without a driver. He doesn't seem to think that's too far off. What are your thoughts?
Well, technically we could do it, right? Like
Yeah,
it's legislation, and legislation and governments move slower than what we will want them to move.
yeah,
That unfortunately, I think there needs to be an agitator, so a company or private company that pushes the innovation in that space to make it a reality, whether it be a Tesla or another mobility company that does that.
yeah.
And hopefully it's one that's locally, like an Australian company will be great.
It'd be brilliant. Yeah, because then you're already at the front. You're already at the forefront, aren't you? There
Oh,
to
and
test and play around with it and
we
stuff. Yeah,
we've got so many bright people in this country. It'd be a shame for them not to be part of this, journey from transition from conventional vehicles to autonomous personal mobility.
yeah, brilliant. So we're in the last 10 minutes of the webinar. So once again, just another reminder, if you do have any final questions that you want to shoot through to us, the keystroke is Alt H, type in your question and press enter. and we'll get those questions over to our guest Nick. Otherwise, I have prompted Nick as well. We usually get a lot of emails at the end of the webinar saying how much they enjoyed it, so don't be too deterred by that. But yeah, definitely get your questions in now. Ben, what have you got planned for the next 12 months? What's happening for you? When's the Formula SAE competition happening? Has it happened already?
No, no, no. So the Formula SAE competition happens every December, and I believe the date, so the 7th to the 10th,
Yeah.
yep, of December this year. And for anyone that would like to come, the best day to come is the Saturday, as we have plenty of events going on. We've got acceleration events, we've got the skid pad going on, and of course we've got the AV demonstration in late Saturday afternoon as well.
Brilliant. And what about yourself? What have you got coming up in the next 12 months? How can people follow you?
Well, I don't really do the social media that much.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
cool.
I like to keep it all under secret hush hush.
Yeah,
I occasionally do post on the novotion.com.au website,
yeah.
which definitely needs a bit of an update since last year. But most of the work that I'm doing is involving the planning and setting up the competition for EV and also autonomous for December.
Is the competition to where you'd like it to be 10 years on? Has it exceeded your expectations, or is it kind of met those? Or
It just keeps on getting better and better, to be honest. Like the caliber of students we're getting, they're just incredibly smart cookies, right? And technically, we're as event organizers, we're also getting better. Like, the auto industry, maybe in the mid 2000s or 2015s to 820, it wasn't in a great place. It really wasn't. And the competition was one of those things in the automotive space that just kept on going despite all the rapid changes, the demise of Toyota, Mitsubishi, Holden, and Ford.
yeah.
And I think it's going to be one of those things that also drives innovation forward into the future.
Yeah, definitely. And one of those situations as well, to be a bit of a trailblazer in something that, it's so unknown territory, isn't it? There'd have to be so many students coming to you as part of this competition with something you've just never seen before and couldn't imagine. Have
Absolutely.
you had one of those situations recently, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So because we don't, we our rule book's quite thick, and there's a lot
Yeah,
of rules, but it's open enough that teams can interpret things in different ways.
yeah,
So we've got rules around stored energy for braking. So in the situation where a vehicle must make an emergency stop, that the energy is released. Um, Teams can choose many different methods of doing that. Like energy, for instance, could be stored in a spring, or it could be stored in a pneumatic canister.
yeah,
And how that energy is applied can be quite different. So it's lucky I'm not the only person. I'm part of a subcommittee team, and we get together and we review this, and we're quite diverse in our skill sets. We've got mechanical engineers, electronic engineers, we've got people that are sort of a bit of both. And
yeah. As I
yeah,
said, it'd be very fascinating being at the forefront of some of this technology coming through. I imagine you're probably sitting there at numerous points, just pinching yourself, going, I could not have even envisioned this. I was one of those kids that had a car poster, and everyone had a car poster that I knew on their wall of the most, you know, the most photogenic car, not the most practical car, just the most photogenic. And I remember having a contage on
yeah.
the wall. And now I look at some of the cars that are kind of coming out and some of the technology that's coming out. And I remember I think it was Top Gear, they were trying to park one of those contages. You had to hang out the door. You didn't need to know all that having a kid's poster on your wall, did you? So I imagine you've come across so many technologies that you probably never even envisioned could happen. So
Oh, absolutely. It's like we need the contages of the world so that we can actually make the practical Toyotas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to the Corolla.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah, correct.
it. All right. Well, we're getting to the last minute of the webinar. So any last final questions from people, get them in. Otherwise, at this point in time, Nick, I have to thank you so much for your time. I know how busy you are. So thank you for joining us and chatting about some of this technology and being quite open and candid about it as well. It takes, as I said, being an engineer, it takes a bit of bravery to talk about things that you know, that you don't want, like that you're concerned that could be so many other different things that come into play. So we do appreciate you taking so much time out of your day to candidly speak to us.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity. It's been fantastic.
And we look forward to you helping create some technology for Ben, so we can see him blow the cobwebs off again on the
Yeah,
salt flats.
that's it. Well, if you know any sponsors, let us know.
Will do. All right, Nick, Owen, thank you so much for your time once again.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Vision Australia.
Blindness, low vision,
Opportunity.
Vision Australia logo. 3 navy blue ovals linked together diagonally within a bright yellow rectangle.